Welcome. If you found your way here tonight, maybe it's because your heart needed a quiet place to land. In a world that often rushes past us, where news scrolls faster than breath, and days blur into the next, this is a space to slow down. These stories, gently stitched together from small truths, ordinary kindness, and unexpected moments, they are not loud. They don't need to be. They are reminders of love that lingers, of people who saw us when no one else did, of the quiet courage that lives in everyday lives. So settle in, let the fire crackle, the day fall away, and listen. These are stories from the hearth. Story 1, The Teacher Who Saw Us. In the heart of West Auckland, decades ago, a group of university students were sent into the city's most struggling schools to evaluate at-risk kids. They were asked to profile 100 students who lived in overcrowded homes, faced poverty, or came from broken families. The students did their research, wrote their papers, and nearly every conclusion was the same. They won't amount to much. 25 years later, another lecturer at the same university stumbled across that old study. Curious, he gave his students a challenge: track those children down. And they did. A few had moved away. A few had passed on. But out of the 90 still living in the area, 84 were thriving: nurses, builders, lawyers, teachers, even one MP stunned. The lecturer asked each of them, what changed? What helped you rise beyond those predictions? Time and time again, the answer came: Miss Rua, my teacher. When they finally found her, she was retired, living in a modest flat near the harbour. When asked what her secret had been, her eyes lit up. Oh, love, she said, smiling. That's easy. I believed in them. Sometimes, belief is the only light someone needs to find their way out of the dark. Story 2, The Last Lantern. A long-distance bus pulled into a rainy stop outside Rotorua. On board, an elderly man clutched a hand-woven lantern with small pressed flowers embedded in the rice paper. It flickered gently with a tea light inside. Across from him, a young woman with red-dyed hair, earbuds in but no music playing, kept glancing at it. The man noticed. As the bus neared his stop, he slowly stood, walked over, and gently placed the lantern in her lap. My wife made these. She passed in spring. I was on my way to bring this to her grave. But I think she'd want you to have it. Inside the lantern was a folded note: to whoever holds this light, even if today feels dark, there is still beauty worth seeing. There is still you. She blinked. Her eyes stung. In that moment, with the soft flicker of the lantern warming her hands, she felt seen. Not fixed. Not saved. Just seen. Story 3, The Hug That Broke the Silence. In a Wellington cafe known for strong flat whites and stronger opinions, an older man named Walter carried a cloth pouch everywhere he went. Inside were small crocheted hearts with Velcro on the back. He'd offer them to strangers in exchange for hugs. One morning, he visited a hospice in Lower Hutt with his friend Talia, a retired nurse turned clown performer. In one room sat Jonah, a man who hadn't spoken in years. Walter hesitated. I don't think he'd understand. Talia looked at him gently. He doesn't need to understand. He needs to be included. So Walter placed a heart on Jonah's bib and gave him a long, quiet hug. A moment later, Jonah made a sound. A squeal. A giggle. Then something no one expected. His lips twitched upward into a smile. Nurses stood frozen. That's the first time we've seen him smile in 7 years. Sometimes, all it takes is one person to remember that even silence needs to be held. Story 4. The Postcard in the Rain. It was a soaked morning in Invercargill. A schoolboy named Nico trudged to class, uniform clinging to his legs, weighed down by more than just his backpack. As he passed the gate, he noticed a postcard wedged into the chain-link fence. He pulled it free. It was sealed in plastic. On the front, a painting of a sunrise. On the back, it read, "D.U. Yes, you. I don't know your name, but I do know storms pass. Keep walking." He turned it over in disbelief. Was it meant for him? He looked around. No one in sight. He put it in his pocket. Weeks passed. He didn't tell anyone. But later, he began writing postcards of his own and hiding them under benches, taping them to lockers, leaving them in library books. Some said nothing. Others said everything. Hope, it turns out, spreads best when it's not asking for credit. Story 5. Grandpa's Old Boots. When Levi was a boy, he thought his grandfather's boots were magic. They were cracked, dusted with old concrete, but they always returned home, no matter how far the job, how long the day. Years later, after his grandfather passed, Levi found the boots sitting by the back door. He slipped them on. Too big, but somehow they felt right. Tucked inside was a note in faded ink. You won't always feel ready. Wear them anyway. Life isn't about feeling ready, it's about walking anyway. Now a builder himself, Levi keeps those boots above his workbench. He doesn't wear them anymore. But some mornings, when the doubt creeps in, he touches the worn leather and smiles. Because love doesn't retire. It gets passed on. Story 6. The Quiet Bench. At the edge of a coastal walking path near New Plymouth stood a weathered wooden bench. Most passed by without noticing the small brass plaque fixed to it. But every Sunday, a boy named Eli sat there with his grandfather. One day, after his grandfather passed, Eli returned to the bench alone. When he sat, he noticed something he hadn't before. On the plaque, beneath the name, were the words, "He sat here to remember you." Curious, Eli asked the council about the plaque. They told him it had been donated anonymously years ago. No one ever came forward to claim it. So Eli made a habit of sitting there every Sunday. Eventually, others joined him. A woman mourning a son. A man who had stopped speaking. A girl writing poems in a tattered notebook. They didn't speak often. They just Saturday and remembered. Because sometimes the most powerful things aren't loud. They are just present. Story 7. The Paper Tree. In a small classroom tucked behind the hills of Queenstown, a teacher named Anika asked her students to draw their dreams. Most drew cars, planes, or mansions. One child, Tama, drew a single tree made entirely of paper. "It grows stories," he explained. At home, Tama's family was struggling. Bills piled high. His mother cried often in the kitchen. But at school, Tama began folding tiny stories, one sentence each, into paper leaves, hanging them on a real tree branch he'd brought to class. Soon, other students added their own leaves. Wishes. Thanks. Little poems. By term's end, the tree was full. And in the final week, Anika sent each child home with 3 leaves that weren't their own. When Tama read his, one line said, "Because of your tree, I started writing again." Another said, "You remind me of hope." Tama never said much. But the tree had spoken. Story 8. The Ride Home. Just outside Christchurch, A boy named Jonah was walking home from school when he spotted a shiny blue bike outside a dairy. A boy about his age stood beside it, hands in his pockets, staring at the wheels like they were made of gold. "Yours?" Jonah asked. The boy shook his head. "Nah, just dreaming." Jonah looked down at his own bike. It wasn't fancy. A bit scratched. But it worked. He handed the handlebars to the boy. "Want a ride?" The boy's eyes widened. "Really?" "One condition," Jonah said. "You gotta give someone else a ride one day." The boy took off down the pavement, laughing in the wind. Years later, Jonah received a letter in the post. "You won't remember me, but I remember you. I've given a dozen rides since." That's how the wheels keep turning. Sometimes, generosity isn't about grand gestures. Just a ride home. Story 9. The Quiet Rescue. At a rural train stop in Canterbury, a man named Leo sat alone on a bench, watching the fog roll across the tracks. A stranger approached, looking lost, worn, and hollow-eyed. "Long wait?" the stranger asked. Leo nodded. "Yeah, but sometimes the wait is part of the reason we are here." They sat together in silence for almost an hour. No questions. No advice. When the train finally arrived, the stranger stood up, paused, then turned to Leo. "You didn't say anything," he said. "But today, that's exactly what I needed." The man boarded the train. A year later, Leo received a postcard. "Thank you for sitting with me. I was going to disappear that day. But you saw me, and that made me stay. We never know the weight of our quiet presence." Story 10. The Note in the Wallet. In Palmerston North, a teenager named Ava found her father's wallet on the kitchen table, left open beside a half-finished coffee. She peeked inside, curious. Behind his cards was a folded slip of paper, worn, almost falling apart. It was her handwriting. A note she'd written in Year 3, "Daddy, you're my hero. Don't forget it." That evening, she asked him, "Do you still carry that old note?" He smiled. "Every day since you gave it to me." "But why?" "Because on the days I feel like I'm failing." I read that, and it gets me through. Ava hugged him tighter than she had in years. Sometimes the smallest notes carry the loudest truths.